welcome back. In this week's video, we're going to take a close look at collections in Lightroom. Collections are a powerful tool in selecting and grouping images together for a variety of purposes. And thanks to Anthony for suggesting this as a topic for a video. So let's dive in now and have a close look at how collections work in Lightroom. So here we are in Lightroom and we're going to have a look at collections. Now, firstly, there's a couple of important things to remember about collections. Collections are just an external reference to where the images are located, put together in an easy to follow way where we can manipulate and use images to create something like a portfolio or a book or so forth. So where do the collections reside? Well, firstly, there are 4 different types of collections. The first and most simple way that we can make a collection is we can create a quick collection, and we'll come back and look at that in a minute. And then if we scroll all the way down past all of our folders in our library, we will come down to the collections panel. And you can see here that I've got a great number of collections because I use them all the time. But essentially within our collections there are 3 other types apart from that quick collection. There's what we call a smart collection. These are collections that are automatically created by Lightroom, and we'll come back and look at them in a little more detail. We have a thing called collection sets where we have like a box where we put a bunch of different collections into, or we can just have a standard collection where we group together images. So let's go back firstly and have a look at creating or how we set up collections. And the simplest way to create a collection is when we're working through our image files, we want to put together a group of images for a particular topic. Let's just say we pick out a few images and we want to put them into what's called a quick collection so that we can quickly analyze them and see if they're what we want. Easy way to do that is each of these image thumbnails has a little dot in the corner. If you just click on that dot, it will be added to the quick collection. Another way to do that is to just right mouse click on an image and say add to quick collection, but obviously it's much better and easier to just go click on that little dot and these are automatically added to your quick collection. I'm just going here more or less at random, but you can see by just doing this we can add together a number of different images, and we've now got what's called a quick collection. And here it is, just a group of images that we've selected out of our file that we might want to put together for some particular reason. That's making a quick collection, and then of course you can simply say, oh well, I don't want that. I can just right mouse click and say remove from quick collection, or I can hit that same dot and remove it from the quick collection. So that's an easy way to just make a quick collection, which is just a group of images that you're considering for some particular purpose. Let's go back to the folder. An easy way to do that is if you're not sure where they came from, right mouse click, go to folder in library, takes you back to where the images were sourced from. And let's just add a few more into this quick collection. And obviously you're going to be selecting images for a particular purpose, and let's just say we've grouped together a number of images, and we go back and we look at our quick collection. Right at the very top here we've got 5 images in there. What we can do now, we can save that quick collection and turn it into a proper collection, and this is going to be called sample because it's just a sample, and we can then clear them out of the quick collection after we've saved it. So we've created a collection now of images, and if we scroll down to our collections, you'll see here I called this one sample. Here it is. These are the 5 images, and now I can start to move them around and decide if I want to put them into a particular order. And if I decide I don't really want that particular image in my collection, I can just right mouse click and say remove from collection. So collections are just a way of grouping images together for a particular purpose. We'll now go and have a look at a little more detail at smart collections and collection sets, because these are very powerful tools. So we've had a quick look at how we create a quick collection and then turn it into a standard collection. But we're now going to have a look at these other types of collections. And one thing that's really useful is what Lightroom has by default is called smart collections. and Lightroom comes with a few standard smart collections, and you can create your own. And these are simply collections that are automatically generated through Lightroom based on particular metadata. For instance, anything that you give a red label to anywhere in your catalog will appear in the smart collection that says colored red. And I've created another one for purple labels, and Lightroom has a default one for 5 stars, and you can add to these and do whatever you like to make additional smart collections. But by default, anything that you give a 5-star rating to can automatically appear here. Now, I created one for a particular purpose. I wanted to nominate any image that was taken with the flash on the camera, and that's an easy thing to set up. There are a lot of ways you can use smart collections to just simply create collections for you without any additional effort. So how do we make a smart collection? Well, firstly, what we do is in the main collections tab, we go up to the little plus and minus button. Obviously, minus means remove a collection. We want to create a new collection, and when we click that plus button, we have a number of options. Firstly, we can create a normal collection, we can create a smart collection, or we can create a collection set. We'll come back and look at collection sets in a minute. But in this case, I want to create a smart collection, and I'm going to call this one. Let's say, for instance, I've taken a number of images with a long lens. I want to just isolate all of those, so I'm going to call this 600mm lens, and I'm just going to use Lightroom to automatically select all these for me. So I've given it a name. By default, it just says collections or smart collection, which is really useless. We don't want it in a collection set at this point, but what I want to do is I want to match all of the following rules, and we create the rules here. Now, you have the option of, you can select that it meets any of the following rules, all of the following rules, or none of the following rules. In other words, you can create a rule that excludes a whole lot of criteria. In this case, I just want to create a rule that says I want to have a rule that says I want any photograph that's taken with a focal length that is, it's either is not, greater than, less than, greater or equal to, less than and equal to, or is within a focal range. So I'm just saying, well, I just want it is 600mm, and I create that collection. And automatically, in fact instantly, here's my collection, my smart collection, that anything that's been taken with a 600mm lens, it's automatically appeared here. Now, I've not asked for any other criteria such as star ratings or color labels, and I could easily add those in. So let's say for now the smart collection has found 2,349 images. Well, I really just want the ones that I've processed and saved as a Photoshop file. So okay, let's go back in here and modify that collection, that smart collection. So if I right mouse click on this, I can come down and say edit smart collection. Okay, I forgot to add the criteria for it being a Photoshop file. So let's just add a criteria here, and there's a little plus button over on the right hand side. I say okay, I want a new criteria. I don't want the rating, I want the file name or type, I want the file type, and the file type is going to be Photoshop files only. So now I'm going to filter those down into just Photoshop files, and actually, while I think about it, I only want the ones that are 5-star rated. So let's add another criteria now and say yes, the rating is got to be greater or equal to 5 stars. Bang. And now I'm down to 50 images, and these are all taken with a 600mm lens. They're a Photoshop file, and they've been given a 5-star rating by me somewhere along the way. And you'll see here that there's also some color labels, and I haven't asked about color labels, so it's including any color label. And so here I have quite simply created a smart collection. I don't have to do any other work, it does it all for me. It's quite a simple way to work. So smart collections can be really powerful. I created another one where I'd selected the images only where I'd used the flash, and you'll see there's quite a lot of people photographs, but there's also a lot of other images as well. And I could refine these criteria down even further should I choose to. And one of the most interesting ones is the default one that has within the Smart Collections recently modified, and we'll have a look at that now. So within the Smart Collections, the recently modified one is a really handy tool if you're just trying to find something you worked on just a little while ago and you can't quite remember where you saved it or where it went. We can look at it in there. Now, recently modified will include images such as raw files that you've applied some processing to, and they'll also include Photoshop or TIFF files that you've created from scratch. So recently modified by default I think is set to 3 months, but let's have a look and see what it is. So if I right mouse click on that again and say, well, let's edit that Smart Collection, even though it's one that's created by default within Lightroom, we can still modify it. So essentially by default it just says, well, any image that matches the rule that says the edit date is in the last so many months. Now I've changed that to 6 months. Let's just change it for the sake of the discussion to 1 month. Now I'll just do that, and you'll see now that I've been a bit busy. Within the last month I've modified 246 images. You'll see there's some raw files here, a couple of Photoshop files, you name it, there's a whole lot in here, but they're all images that I've modified within the last 3 months, so that, or last month as this case is. And this is really handy if you're just trying to find an image, you forgot where you saved it or where it came from. So here we have, here's this image of this grizzly bear, and I want to go back to the original folder. Well, it's automatically appeared in the recently modified folder. If I select that image, right mouse click and say go to folder in library, it takes me directly to the folder where it came from, which is obviously from Canada and Alaska. There it is, and so I can go and find that original image. And likewise, if I'm in the folder and I want to know if it's in a collection, I can right mouse click on that and say go to collections. Well, that one's not in any collection because it's only looking at collections that I've created, so it won't find it in the Smart Collections, unfortunately. But if it's in a normal collection, you can easily find it by going backwards from the collection. So let's just go back from there. Let's just escape out of that, come back down to our Smart Collections, recently modified. Here he is. I can go back to the folder and find where it came from. But for instance, if it's in any sort of folder here, I can go and find it in the library. Yes, it's here in this library of Trip to the Arctic, and likewise I can, from here I can go to the collection. It's actually in 3 different collections, so it takes me back to that collection that I made earlier. So Smart Collections are a really powerful tool to help you find images, particularly using these automatic settings. You don't have to do anything, they're automatically added to the collection as you enter them and edit them within Lightroom. So Smart Collections are a really powerful tool, and you can then modify those or create your own to suit. We'll next have a look at collection sets. So we're now going to look at collection sets, and looking at the collections panel, you'll see that a collection set looks like a little box, like a little archive box or a file drawer, something like that. And a collection set is simply a box or a folder where we keep a number of other collections within. For instance, the Smart Collections is a collection set, and it contains all of these other collections within it. And if I hit this little triangle symbol here, it will fold that up. And collection sets are particularly good if you're working on a large variety of different collections and you want to then consolidate them all into one group. For instance, I recently made a book on animal portraits, and what I did was I selected and created a whole bunch of different collections within that collection set so that I could then group them together and decide. For instance, I had one of just birds, I had one of penguins. Now I'm a particular fan of penguins, and there's about 80 photographs within there. And then what I wanted to do was to cull that down into a short list for inclusion in the book. And so from this collection set, I created a number of individual collections within that, and then finally I made a new collection from still within that collection set of the short list to be considered to go into the book. And so collection sets are no more complicated than just a box to put a number of other collections within. And particularly if you're creating a book or something like that, for instance, with an Iceland book, I created a number of collections within that included different topics, and then I culled those down to a smaller group. So collection sets, really useful, and you can then put a number of collections within that, and then you've got them all grouped together, and that's as complicated as collection sets get. We're now going to have a little bit more of a detailed look at how we work with collections and work with them in editing our images. We've had a look at the different types of collections, the quick collections, the standard collections, the collection sets, and the smart collections. And now we're going to have a look at how we work with these collections in our editing workflow. So let's just have a look down here. I prepared a collection of images for use in a previous video, and we can now have a look at these and see how that works, working between Lightroom, Photoshop, and back to our collections. Now, it's important to remember that an image that appears in a collection is the same image that's in your folder. It's not a separate copy or anything like that, so that when you go and modify an image, now let's just have a look here. I made a virtual copy of this particular file. It's not a great image, but let's just have a look at this. I mucked around and changed the white balance. Let's just say that we wanted to give it a particular rather bizarre look. So I've modified this. Let's go back to our library. Here it is, it's the modified file. Now if I right mouse click and go to folder in library, I'm now back in my original folder, and you'll see here that it's the same image I modified. It appears in both places. There's no duplication, but there are a couple of little tricks we need to remember. So I'm going to go back to the collection, and the easy way to get back to that collection is right mouse click on the image, go to the collection. Here it is, it's in this particular collection. Now there's a little bit of a rule when you're working from a collection and you want to take, say, a raw file into Photoshop, modify it and then save it back as a Photoshop or a TIFF file. We want it to automatically come back to our collection so that then we can compare it and decide which one we want. So let's just do this. Right mouse click, edit in Photoshop 2022, and let Photoshop open the image, and then we'll modify it and then save it. Here we are in Photoshop. Here's this rather horrible image. This is just purely for the exercise so that we can see what we can do to it. Let's just do something radical, and let's just change the hue and saturation. I've now created this rather bizarre red looking image. So now if I just simply go to File, Save, it will save the image back in the original folder, and it will also appear in the collection. But if you go to File, Save As, because Photoshop doesn't always recognize where the image came from, it doesn't automatically send it back to the original folder. Now because this is the original folder is the last one I opened, Photoshop will automatically go there. But let's just, before I go back to this one, let's just find another image I made. This is from a different location and a different folder in my library. Let's just again do something simple with it, and let's just say, change the color. This is an easy way to see. I've made a horrible image, and if I now go to say File, Save As, because I want to give it a different file name, it's trying to put it back into this folder that I last used rather than its source folder. So this can be a bit of a problem. If I cancel out of that, and if I just go to File, Save, it will save it back into the original folder. Now I've spoken to Adobe about this and they still haven't managed to solve it. I don't know whether they don't want to or they can't, but it's still a little bit of a problem. So you have to be on your toes when you're saving these images out, and just make sure you're always saving it back into the correct folder. However, because I came from a collection and I saved it without giving it a different file name, you'll see that the Photoshop file has now appeared beside that, and it's still within that collection. So now I can look at those and decide, yes, well, do I want this one or that one? Well, obviously I don't want this one. If we go back to our grid view, I can remove it. Now, the problem is, while you're in a collection, you've saved a new Photoshop file, it's appeared in the collection, but I can't delete the file from within the collection. All I can do is remove it from the collection. So to actually remove this file that I've created, I need to go to the folder in the library. You'll see now here it is appeared in this folder, and for me to delete it, I can come down and say remove photo, delete from disk. I don't want it anymore, it's gone. So let's just go back to the collection. This is the original raw file. Let's go back to the collection, and it's in two different collections. Here's my original folder, my original raw file, and as it happens a Photoshop file, and of course that horrible one that I saved is gone. So while you're working in a collection, you can save an image back as a Photoshop or TIFF file. It will automatically appear back in the collection, but if you then want to delete that folder or that file completely, you need to go back to the original folder. The collection will only allow you to add or delete from the collection. It won't allow you to delete the image altogether. And now let's have a look at some other little options with working with collections. Now there's just a couple of other things that we need to think about when we're talking about collections. Now the same image can be in multiple collections. This particular one, which is a favorite of mine, the polar bear on the ice, I'm within this collection that I made for a previous video, but if I right mouse click on this and have a look at collection, it actually appears in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different collections. It's still the same image, so regardless of which collection I'm in or the original folder, if I make any changes to that image, it's going to instantly appear in all of those collections. And the beauty of this is I'm not duplicating any files. I'm only making a very small difference to the actual size of the Lightroom catalog, but I've got all of the power of being able to select images and group them together for multiple purposes. So this is another fantastic way we can work with collections. And of course, while I'm in a collection, I can then start to move these things around to put them into some sort of semblance of order that I might decide that I want to think about a book or a portfolio or something like that. And I can look and compare, and you'll see here, for instance, I've got a photograph of a puffin, and I've got the original raw file, and I've got another one that I made slightly differently, and I can look through all of these images and decide which is the ones that I want to use for the collection. So I'm preparing a group of work. I've got the original file, I've got another copy of the raw file. Actually, I want to keep the Photoshop file in my collection. I don't really want these raw files anymore. If I right mouse click and remove from the collection, it just goes from the collection. It does not go from your original source, your original folder. Likewise, any virtual copies I might make and so forth. So by removing them from a collection, you're not deleting anything. It's quite safe. In this collection, I don't really want that one anymore. I just want my original saved Photoshop file. So you can see that collections are very useful, and of course I can drag images around and reorder them from within the collection without worrying about any disturbance to the original file locations, and it just allows me to work with the images and select them. Particularly when you're working on something like a book, you really want to get a sequence going that's going to give you a feeling of how the book is going to go together. And I've got a separate group of videos on using Lightroom and Photoshop to make photo books, which are really helpful, and collections are a big part of that. So that's pretty much collections. I hope that's been useful, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.